So today we'll focus on cloud economics and billing. So let us quickly go through this content and see. So some if, in case if so that we don't miss out anything. So it's going to be all about the okay, what is this? An error. Okay, so today, as I mentioned, we are focusing on module 2, cloud economics and billing. So how everything is built and how cloud economics work. So that is what we are going to focus on. Okay, so one of the terms which I had already mentioned, um I've already mentioned earlier, um, was economies of scale. Um, so when you say economies of scale, uh, it means the more you say, you kind of provide, the more you sell your product, or the more you people use your services, the cost for the customer can be reduced, right? So if there are so that's the term I mentioned, economies of scale. Okay, remember this term, it can come in your exam. Economies of scale. So even though you are in IT, you have to understand a little bit how economies work, how costing works, right? So you have to know a little bit of accounting. So everything is connected, right? So cloud is a business after all, and they have to, if they have to sustain, then and they may have to make sure they have a particular business model, right? So economies of scale is one particular business model where your the more your business is scaled, the more your business is scaled, you know um, the more the possibility to reduce the cost to the customer. So remember, when the price is reduced to the customer, it does not mean the business is losing any money. Like so basically, if there were 10 customers and it was, let's say they were billed 100 rupees each, for example, this would become 1000 rupees, right, for the business. But if there are 10,000 people, and then you reduce the bill to 20 rupees, the cost for the customer is definitely reduced, but it does not mean the business cost will be reduced, right? This will be 2 lakhs. So you see, the cost is not really means definitely, if they had charged this side, and like something like 100 rupees here in the earlier example, uh, then the amount would have been, the profit would have been much more. But economies of scale is what uh, so economies of scale is something, you know the business model which cloud adopts, because they are trying to this business is trying to reach the public globally, right? So when you are trying to reach the public globally, the more number of people you're trying to reach out, economies of scale is a better model, because that is something which is almost acceptable by most of them, right? Um, um, so do you know any such product which sells for cheap and tries to reach out for a greater uh, you can say greater number of customers? So if you have, for example, if you see Parle-G biscuits is sold for rupees 5, right? And so 5 rupees is something which is affordable by most of the people in the country, right? And we are a population of 1 billion. So the chances of selling more becomes much higher. And so where we think the money is lost, actually we gained a lot of more business, which would have not been possible without economies of scale. So we see this kind of examples in like shampoo sachets, right? Shampoo sachets are also sold maybe for rupees 2 to rupees 5 across the country, right? And that so so this cost is associated with how many customers we are looking at, right? So definitely, if everybody was rich, then definitely the price would have been bigger. But everybody is not, right? So the dynamics of the world is different. So how do you kind of survive in this kind of economy on a greater scale? So on public globally, so AWS is basically not only looking at one country, right? It is trying to look at all the public people across the world who want to start the business, and not every country is on the same development level or the same economic level or the same the level of financial independence. So so that is why economies of scale does matter. So one of the other things which AWS promises is the cost. If the number of people will increase, the cost will reduce. So that is the promise, by AWS, and that they will reduce the price. The more the number of customers, the price will reduce. So now you have to remember, as far as the infrastructures are still the same, but yes, the infrastructure is added on a regular basis all over the world. So new regions are new regions are they try to attempt to get into the new regions where they try to create their own data centers. So, but new regions are not created that quickly. So that for the region to be created, AWS has to make sure the land is given by the governments, and they can maintain the quality of the network and the services that can be offered via that country or via that location. Okay, so having said that, so let's look into this. Fundamentals of pricing, total cost of ownership, AWS organization, billing cost management. Okay. Okay, so here you are looking at the pricing model, right? How prices are charged over here. So it says compute, it is charged per hour or per second. So there are some services which will be charged for every second. So if you are using for 3 seconds, you'll be charged for that. But there are some services, even if you use 1 second, it will be charged for 1 hour. So you have to be very careful, when your which services are how they are charged. Either is it charged per hour, or is it charged per second? And so this is what happens in the compute. So in the compute, what all will come? Compute your physical machines may come, because a physical machine. So AWS can give you physical machine that is called the dedicated host. That physical machine is dedicated to you, and you are the customer, which they are fully hosted on that entire physical machine. So a cost of a physical machine will definitely be higher compared to virtual machine, because one physical machine ideally can be used to create multiple virtual machines, right? So it is not necessary all the virtual machines. So when you are having multiple virtual machines on the same physical machine, the cost is divided uh, in terms of virtual machines, which is given to each customer. So the cost is distributed between the customer. But when you take over the entire physical machine, then you're paying for the entire lot, right? So you're not sharing it with anyone. It's like you are paying, if you're staying in a house and you're paying a rent, let's say, then you're paying the entire rent for that. But if you're sharing the same house with four other people, then you're sharing the rent. So that way the cost is distributed to you. So having a full house for yourself and paying the rent is like having the full physical machine, and that is an example of a dedicated host. So remember the word. So I introduced to you the word called economies of scale, and then I this is a new word. This is dedicated host. So dedicated host is your entire physical machine. Okay. So there are scenarios when you want the entire physical machine, because especially when you're shifting from, let's say, your company, you must have bought some software for the particular price. You must be having your licenses, and you want to make sure these licenses are existing on the physical machine totally. So what is the advantage of having it on the physical machine? The license is then can be used by all the virtual machines that is running on that physical machine. So, and that is the biggest advantage, right? So you're not paying for separate license of the software for each virtual machine. You're paying one time license for the physical machine, and that license has been used by all the virtual machines that are created on that physical machine. So that is the advantage of using dedicated host. So dedicated host, in this case, the tenancy is equal to dedicated. Means the tenancy is basically person who's staying on rent, right? So if you are taking the entire machine for yourself, then the tenancy is dedicated. If that physical machine is shared between different number of users, the tenancy would have been shared. Okay, which means you're sharing the same physical machine with everyone else. So that is what tenancy means. The tenant is means person who stays on rent. So remember that word. And it says the compute. So compute charges can be per hour or per second, and it will vary by instance type. So there are different types of virtual machines, right? Some will have two processors, some will have eight processors, and some will have 1 GB memory, and some machines may have 8 GB memory. So what type of machines you're using, depending on that also the cost will vary for the compute. So compute also you will come across with containers, right? So when we say compute charges, so these are charges for the machine, you mostly, right? Charges for the physical machine, it can be, right? If you're taking if you're if you have asked for a physical dedicated machine host, if your the charges can be for virtual machine. So virtual machine is like a your software, right? Which simulates a machine on the top of a physical machine. So remember, virtual machines are easy to migrate, right? Physical machines, of course, they will be it is a bigger process. But virtual machine, it is a matter of just deleting the software, making sure that you have a backup of the software, and transferring that software somewhere else. So that is as simple as moving a machine. Ultimately, virtual machines are nothing but it is a file, right? Like just like any other file, your image file we say, or so it is usually called a machine image file. Right, and so in compute the charges can be for containers also, right? Your containers is also like operates like a virtual machine, but it is smaller in size, okay, compared to virtual machine. So in a virtual machine the image file usually contains the operating system also, and the operating system, as you know, if you try to download Ubuntu operating system, it will be like 2 GB size or 3 GB size. It will be much bigger in size compared to and hence the virtual machine, because it is installing the entire operating system, the size is more. But in containers it is using operating system virtualization, which means the type of virtualization which containers use is called operating system virtualization, which means operating system is shared. So where is this operating system will be installed? The operating system will be installed on the physical machine, and so you may have a let's say a Windows operating system on the physical machine, but whatever virtual containers are created above that, that will not contain the operating system, that will share that will use the underlying physical machine's operating system. So I hope you all understand this. We'll come back to this containers and in one of the later modules. If where one of the modules is about compute, so that is the time. Definitely, we can talk more about it. But at a very high level, you have to understand physical machine is the entire is actually the real piece, right? On this, you can create many virtual machines, and each virtual machine can be belonging to different customers, and each virtual machine will have its own operating system. So you can have one virtual machine with Linux and another operating system with Windows, but running on the same physical machine. And the same thing ideally. So containers, the operating system should be common, right? Because it is dependent on the physical machine. But there are different techniques, advanced techniques of how to run containers with different operating system on the same physical machine also. So that we will not speak about now. Okay. So these are the compute charges we say. What are the other charges? The storage charges, right? So when you speak about, so in this your EC2 will come, EC2 services charges will come, which is your virtual machine, which then your the other charges which will come is uh, uh, your definitely your dedicated host machine, which I spoke to you about. And then containers, there are services like elastic container service, right? Those are the container technology. So then there is another container technology which is EKS, right? Elastic Kubernetes services. And there is ECR, which is Elastic Container Registry, and there is Fargate. Fargate is a serverless container solution. So this is a serverless. So the moment I say serverless, which means the user does not have to create any machines. Uh, so in ECS, if you're going with the ECS option, then it is not serverless. But so in this case, you have to upload your machine image file. So if you have done your practicals during the demo, you must have noticed a VDI file is created. That is a machine image file. That is an example. So in containers also you can create such image files and upload it. But in Fargate, you know, uh, so once you give the image file, ideally, you have to make sure the virtual machine is available. But in Fargate, you don't have to make sure the virtual machine is available. It will create the virtual machine on its own. So do remember that whatever service whoever manages, whether you are creating your managing that service or AWS is managing the service, no service runs without a machine. So you have to remember this. Okay, ultimately everything has to be executed on a machine. Question is whether it is a managed service. A managed service means AWS is taking care of it, and AWS is also creating the machines, managing the service, managing using the machines AWS has created. So in this also AWS is created, and this could be a managed service, could be there may be cases when some part of the services you may require to create machines as a part of this managed service, but right now I don't remember an example. But in serverless, remember, no machines are created. So that is, so understand the difference between managed service and non-managed service. Managed service is always something that is managed by AWS, and non-managed service is something which is not managed by AWS, means customer is managing on its own. So customer is creating his own machine, customer is installing his own software. That's what it means. So the other type of charges then you come as storage charges, right? So storage charges, basically it is like your hard disk charges. It is um, so in this compute charges, the definitely all the processing cost will come, your memory cost will come. But when it comes to your storage charges, it is like your similar to your hard disk. So if you have a 1 TB hard disk, and if you are using 100 MB, and then you will be charged for 100 MB, on that. So the charges are based on how much storage you have allocated for yourself, right? So the more, so in this case, all the files that you upload, right, or all the softwares that you upload, whatever you upload, it is ultimately in the terms of files, right? And that has to be stored somewhere, right? It has to be stored on some storage device, and uh, whatever you are storing, depending on how much data you have stored, that much will be you'll be charged, and even database will come in this, right? So database is ultimately your data which is stored, and so you will be charged for depending on how big your database size is, you will be charged for that also. So you have to understand that not only you're paying for compute charges, but you're also paying for storage charges. These two charges are different. So compute charges, you're mainly paying for the processor, for the hardware, and for the memory, right? But storage charges is for the data that you're, the data that you're storing on the storage devices. So what all, sorry. So what all services can come under this? Sorry. So elastic block storage can come this. So whenever you think about storage, all these terms should come to your mind. S3 can come under this. It is a bucket storage, which is object level storage. This EBS is a block level storage. Then RDS, right? Your relational database service. This thing can come over here, and then you have your EFS, which is a elastic file system, right? So this is like your Windows Explorer. So in this also files are stored, right? And so this is a file storage system, and so you are paying for that storage space also, whatever storage you are occupying, or whatever storage you have allocated to yourself. So so RDS is basically an example of relational databases, right? And in your non-relational databases, you have DynamoDB example, right? And so if you're going for a NoSQL database and DynamoDB, then you have QLDB, Quantum Ledger, and so databases, services can be, many more if you have a look at it. But you have to understand that even if you are storing a database, if you're creating a database on a machine, you're paying for compute charges and storage charges. So remember that. So how your when storage is concerned, you're paying for every GB. So even uh, it is calculated, so you will be told that you will be charged rupees 10 per GB. Okay, so if you have so initially you need to allocate the storage, so you can say I just want zero point 0.5 GB. Okay, so and so you will be allocated zero point 0.5 GB, and you will be charged as per this rate, uh, whatever the rates are applicable. Okay, so so remember how much you allocate, you will be charged for it, so remember that. So there are some cases where, let's say, whatever you allocate and whatever you actually use may differ. So so you just watch out, your billing exactly, because I think in this case also, even though you have allocated, let's say, zero point 0.5 GB, they will the charges are different if you are just using 100 MB. So you are charged only for 100 MB, the but you are not given storage more than zero point 0.5 GB. So even if you have allocated zero point 0.5 GB, you are paying for 100 MB on this. But the charges, if you say that, hello, but the charges, the way you will be told is, when the pricing is given per GB cost. Okay, so here it is, either compute charges is what, per hour charge, or it is a per second charge, and storage charges is always in terms of per GB cost. Okay, they will not say 100 MB this much charge is there, they always say per GB, and depending on how much you are using, let's say 100 MB, then will be charged for that.
Sir, your audio is lagging.
Okay, the other type of charges is data transfer charges, right? So data transfer charges is usually related to the network charges, the amount of network data, that you transfer. So so when you, for example, that this kind of charges you see with your normal telecom services, right? Something like Airtel, Jio, you're paying for the data, and you're saying 1 GB data you will get every day, and you'll be paying so much. So in cloud also, whenever the data is moved between one source to another destination, you are in a way paying for it, but you have to know what charges you will be, so you have to be careful in understanding what charges you will be charged. So in order to know, so here it says inbound has no charge with some exception, right? So inbound, so data can be inbound or outbound, right? So whether uh, uh, when you are receiving the data, say it is called inbound, right? And outbound is when you're sending the data. So so how does this work usually on your internet? So internet, you type something on your browser, and you send, or whenever you type something on a browser, for example, do we have a, right, so when you type something over here, right, so right now the data is not gone through, but the moment I press enter key, you're sending this request to somebody or to some service over the internet, so that you are becoming an, for you this becomes your outbound now. But after, once I click on this, let's say I put www.google.com, then I will getting a response also, right? The data comes in. If I again type something, you know over here, so let's say I type Independence Day, then this request is going outbound, but then I'll in return I'll get a response also, right? So the for whatever is outbound for me, the it is inbound for the other end, and whatever response the other end is sending, it is outbound for them, but it is inbound for me. So depending upon what, so when we are talking about cloud, we are talking about inbound and outbound for the AWS services. So in AWS, so whenever we, let's say, um, so if we look at S3 service, right? So S3 service. So S3 service is like you can upload files, right? So when you are uploading the file, the it is outbound for you. But what is it inbound or outbound for AWS? Can somebody tell me?
So inbound.
Right. So inbound charges are not charged. Okay. So that is what it's trying to say. Whenever you upload a file to S3 bucket, you're not charged for that. But remember, the moment the file is stored on that machine, you will be or in inside AWS, you'll be charged for storage. So even though you're not charged for inbound, you're charged for storage. But when you download a file from S3, it is a outbound connection for AWS, and you will be charged based on how much data was transferred. So if you are downloading a 1 GB file, you not only you will have storage charges because there is something stored. Unless you delete the file, you will be charged for it. But you will also be charged for the amount of data that you transferred, which was an outbound connection. So you have to remember this thing. So there was an a between your your browser. So whatever data comes from here to here is always outbound, right? And you will be charged for the data rate. Data, whatever the data is been, what the amount of data, the network consumption you have done, the amount of data you have transferred. But another thing is also that it is quite possible that inside AWS itself, so between inside the AWS, and you are inside your Mumbai region, okay? So let's see, and you have created a machine called EC2, and on this your EC2 machine, you are creating a file and then uploading it to S3. So inside the Mumbai region only means in the same region, right? So Mumbai, somewhere inside Mumbai there are buildings where these machines are running and where this all these services are also there, and the file is transferred within that region only, between the buildings. So diagram is not very neat. So in this case, will you be charged? Yes or no? Can somebody tell me
No, sir.
why?
Because sir, it is inbound. Like it is in the same region, so they don't take any charges for the same region.
Yeah. So
If
if correct. So if it is in the same region, then they may not charge you for your even both for your inbound as well as outbound. Okay. So you have to remember this thing, that in certain exceptions, inbound and outbound within the same region, it may be free. So this can be a question inside in your exam. Okay, if it is in the same region, will you be charged or not? So you have to be very understand what they are exactly talking about. If they're saying you're uploading it from your browser or something, then you'll be charged. But let's say apart from Mumbai region, inside AWS, um, right? So inside, now you're still inside AWS, but this time your region is different. So you have another region called Singapore, and now you have created a S3 bucket over here. And now what is happening, you are dealing with this is same EC2 is storing your data in Singapore. So it is crossing your it is definitely it has to travel over the internet, right? Or whatever global network of AWS. So whatever it is definitely not in the same building, it is not in the same region, you're not talking about the same location, but it has to travel. So there's a amount of travel involved over here. And this data also at the same time will be received or something, it can be received also, right? So both the possibly both the things are there. Whenever you're dealing with services, there is some amount of inbound happening or some amount of outbound happening. If as far as outbound is concerned, at least a request is going in, and then if you're downloading the file, S3 will download the file over here. If you're uploading the file, then the file is going over here. So there's an outbound for EC2, but there's an inbound for S3. So depending on whom it is inbound for and whom it is outbound for, you will be charged across regions. So so data transfer across regions is charged. Data transfer within region is not charged. Inbound is not charged in most cases. I don't remember an example right now of inbound where it is not charged. They're saying it is not charged, but I have not seen any case where inbound was charged. But outbound is charged till then the above criteria is met, that it has to be outside the region. Okay. So definitely if it is between AWS and your browser, then it is those your inbound outbound rules will come into place. But if it is within the AWS network, then all this they have to uh, this kind of rules will be applied. So one of the services you have to keep in mind is called the CloudFront, right? Your CloudFront is basically what CloudFront's main capabilities. Anyone can tell me what is the use of CloudFront? Can anyone tell me what is the use of CloudFront? This question can come. So remember the word front, okay? Which means somebody is coming and standing in front of me wherever I am. Think of CloudFront as like that. The crowd is coming and standing in front of me wherever I am. Just remember this, cloud is coming to me and standing in front of me wherever I am. Which means CloudFront is a technology which kind of, let's say if you have a file on S3 and that S3 file is lying in Mumbai, but let's say your friend is in America. So instead of moving the file from Mumbai to America all the time he asks for that file, CloudFront will make sure he is is like an agent sitting in America for you, where he has all the files which you have to give it to your friend. And whenever your friend is asking you the data, your friend goes and delivers the data because he has a copy of your data. Okay, your copy of your file. So that is what CloudFront means. So CloudFront means it works like an agent for you. So even though your service is in Mumbai, you are able to quickly deliver things inside America. So that is how your normal whenever you want to you're selling a product, and you're selling a product and you go global. Now your customers will say, you are saying you are you are giving services all over India, so will you be waiting for the order in Mumbai for somebody ordering from Delhi? No, right? You will have a warehouse in Delhi where you will have a stock, and your warehouse is like your CloudFront, right? So which is very close to the location where your customers are. And anytime somebody is wanting a product, you take the order in Mumbai, but it is delivered by the warehouse in Delhi, okay, for the Delhi customers. And the same way there will be warehouses all over the country wherever you're trying to reach a service. So that is the only way you can reach faster. So so remember, you know this something like that. The CloudFront is like a local warehouse where which has stored all the data for you, whichever data you want. So so this CloudFront is definitely used in your websites, right, where you have your static files. So static files are your simple welcome pages which where data is not changing or something, that is the welcome page, your home page, your contact page. All this data does not change usually. And so till then, there is no dynamic behavior on that page. You can make a duplicate of that copy and put it on CloudFront, because there's no difference, no change in the data that is displayed on the page. Like welcome page will say, always will say welcome customer, right? So so if I transfer this page somewhere else, it will still say welcome customer. But if you have a behavior on your welcome page which says welcome Palak, and then second when Priscilla is coming and say welcome Priscilla, then it is a dynamic behavior. So that is, then it is no longer a static page, it becomes a dynamic page. So not every time the welcome page will be uh, so dynamic pages are not supported by CloudFront, because it will CloudFront will never know which user it is. That depends on, it will have to check the database, and for database is where your source service is. So you'll have to go back to the source, so warehouse will not know which customer we are talking about. Then in that case, if the warehouse has to know which customer, then it has to go to the source location and in the source database and find out. But the idea what we are talking about is billing though, and you have to keep in mind that even though what is going inbound and outbound depends on where it is moving. So that charges also is uh, so those are the charges of for your data transfer. So here also they'll tell you for every per GB cost, okay? So even though you are charged for how much you are using, when you are given a rate, it will be in terms of per GB. So if you are transferring 1 MB, you will be charged for 1 MB only, okay? So so I hope you all are getting little used to the charges now. So here, how do you pay? You pay for what you use. Either you pay for per hour or per second or per GB, right? That is only cost, and it depends on whether your compute or whether your storage or whether your data transfer. And data transfer depends on whether it is inbound or outbound, and whether it is inbound or outbound within region or across regions or across outside the AWS. Outside the AWS means it moving from AWS to your browser, so it is moving outside. And within AWS means it is within the services, between the services inside AWS. But there is other way also of paying is pay less when you reserve. You're saying you're saying I will pay you for 1 hour, give me some discount. Don't like pay for use. If you're paying for every second 10 rupees, pay less when you reserve will tell you just pay 20 paise for the entire, for every hour the entire year, you know so here also I hope you you're understanding there is a benefit, so upfront, so there are options like you may pay it upfront, but or you may pay it later. If you pay upfront, then again the charges will become less, and if you pay later reserve charges, then the charges will be little more. So so charges may vary whether you have reserved, or whether you are using, so as per the as much as you're using. So so here in the first case you're paying for per second, per hour, or per second or per hour. But here in pay less, when you reserve, you are paying at least for a year, okay, at least 1 year or 3 years. So remember this. So the difference in the time for the time amount of time that you pay for is different, and pay less when you use more, and as AWS grows means this is an example of economies of scale. Okay, that is what we discussed. So here they are saying there is no large upfront cost, right? So you don't have to procure a machine. So procure is a word, means you have to go through this process of buying a machine and actual machine. But here whenever you need a machine, you don't have, you can just go ahead and create it in AWS. And on premises is like, you know, your home, your private company, where they usually have to plan ahead of time, right, to purchase. So AWS, you paying only for what you consume. So if I using a machine for 2 seconds, I'm paying only for that. I know I'm not paying for the machine forever and ever. But on premises, if you once you bring a laptop, once you pay for your desktop, once you pay for your server, you have to pay the entire cost, irrespective of whether you're going to use it or not. So invest in reserved instances. As I told you, you are telling in advance that I am going to use a EC2 instance for 1 year or 3 years. So there are different options. If you see, all upfront means you're paying for the entire 1 year right in the beginning. It is called ORI, all upfront reserved instance. So here you will get definitely the largest discount if you're paying all upfront. Then partial upfront reserved instance is Puri. So lower discount. So little partial upfront means 20% money you pay now, 80% pay money you pay later. So there will be the cost will be little greater. No upfront payment reserve cost means Nuri. So smaller discount. So these are all Nuri, Puri, Ori is all reserved instance, which the time period is minimum 1 year. So pricing may also vary on how much if they're talking about volumes over here, which means the first 100 GB, first 10 GB or first 100 GB may have one cost, and the next 100 GB after that will be lesser cost, right? So it depends on the more you use, the lesser the cost you're paying, so cost is reducing even if your data is increasing. So today I'm using 100 GB of data size, and after 2 years my data is become full, and then I need more 2 GB. You're not paying the same price for the first 2 GB that you paid. Maybe you will be paying a lesser amount. So that is what it means. So now, so as you are using more of your AWS services, your cost is reducing. But as much as AWS grows, also your so you may be using only 200, let's say 100 GB for the forever and ever. So you are paying the same price. You're thinking no, but that price also can reduce if more customers have joined AWS. So if others are joining AWS, also your cost reduces. So if AWS is growing, then also your price is going to reduce. This is an example of economies of scale. So it says, no, since 2006 AWS has lowered prices how many times? 75 times it has announced a reduction in price, not 75%, 75 times. So 75 times it has reduced the prices. So it has probably, it was 100 rupees, then it became 98 rupees, then 99 rupees, and now probably it is 60 rupees. So there is a difference. So 75 times there has been a change in price which was lowered. So here they are talking about if you AWS is offering free services also. in case free tier, right? Free tier, uh, um, it is saying free for 1 year, but I think it is for 1 month now, free tier. So so it is no longer 1 year, I think. So one of the things in free tier you have to remember, not all the services are free. Okay, in free tier, if you go for free tier, some of the services will be free, but every whatever service is free also will have a limit. But some services will not be free at all. So, for example, S3 they may say you can up to 100 GB we will not charge you in free tier, but outside 100 GB they will charge you. Something like some conditions will be there. Some data transfer they'll say we'll charge you for 100 GB of data transfer, not charge you for 10 GB of data transfer, but maybe after 10 GB we will start charging you. So in free tier also you have to remember how it depends on how much services you use and which services you're using.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, sir. These documents are from 2019, so there are a little bit changes in original AWS the website.
Okay.
Yes.
So it says services with no charge means this it doesn't depend whether you are free tier, whether you are not having a free tier, whether you're paying. These services are not charged at all. Any time in your life these services will not be charged at all. So if you go and create some users in IAM, it says IAM is not charged at all. VPC is, if you create some networks, it will not be charged at all. So if you're creating VPC, then subnets inside that, you will not be charged. But inside VPC there are gateways, internet gateway, there are your network, NAT gateway, network allocation transfer or something. I don't remember the full form, but NAT gateways are there. So if you are using any specific those kind of stuff which you are adding onto your network, then definitely you're paying for that. So remember that. So VPC will not be charged. Only when you create a machine inside the VPC, your machine will be charged, not your network. The moment your EC2 sends some data outside its machine to some other destination, you will be charged for data transfer charges or maybe storage charges, but VPC is not charged as such, whatever rules you define. So Beanstalk again is not charged, but definitely whenever you're calling uh, some machine, if there is some machine created in the process, only when the machine comes into existence and data comes into existence, that is the time charges begin to show up. So your AWS CloudFormation is like your infrastructure code, right? It's just like a program. Now that program is, suppose maybe that program is automated to create a machine. So you will not be charged for writing that program or saving that program in CloudFormation. But the moment you run that CloudFormation, it will create a machine, and the moment you create a machine, you will be charged. So in the same way, auto scaling or Beanstalk, whatever your configuration you do, till then you have just configured, till then you have just saved a code. Nothing will, no charges will be there. The moment you run your code, or the moment you run your machine, the moment your data is transferred, you will be charged.
Sir, auto scaling service is used for.
Auto scaling basically is used to duplicate your services, right? So sometimes the load on a particular machine, let's say your Facebook, now 1 million people are using Facebook, right, across the world, say, or 1 billion people. So if 1 billion people, the one machine cannot take that much of network, right? The network inbound limit is really limited. So most of the customers will automatically be rejected, because every machine has a limit on how much it can take input or how much it can send output. It depends on the network bandwidth. So in this case, to solve a problem, we make a duplicate copies in auto scaling. Auto scaling means multiple copies of the website will be made by Facebook, and but you are just typing Facebook all over the world. Everyone is typing Facebook, but it is managed by multiple duplicate copies of the servers, and one way of doing that is using auto scaling. So where we duplicate the number of the same services. So auto scaling means if there are 10,000 people, I will have 5 machines. If there are 1 lakh people, I will scale it to 100 machines, something like that. And when 100 customers are gone away and only there are 5 customers, I will reduce back to 2 machines. So auto scaling means automatically I am growing and automatically I am reducing. So you can do this kind of configuration in auto scaling. So depending on the number of machines that you increase, if you are increasing from 2 to 100, then you will be charged for 100 machine. But till the time and the moment you become 100 to 2 machines, you will be charged only for 2 machines. But just because you said I want 100 machines or auto scaling, it does not mean you'll be charged for 100 machines. You'll be charged only when it is created. Okay. Okay, so now we are getting into this term called total cost of ownership, right? Total cost of it is also called TCO. So this is the term, which you can maybe ask a question on that, and you have to understand what this term means. So basically it means total cost of ownership is a cost of owning something. Okay, let's say I buy a laptop today. So what is my cost of ownership? The cost of ownership will be the cost of laptop. So what is the total cost of laptop? Total cost of laptop is let's say 50,000. So total cost of ownership for me in my house for a laptop in my house. I remember the term in my house. So total cost of ownership for the laptop in my house is 50,000. But then I say, and then you try to compare this with the cost of the same laptop in the cloud. So cloud says what, I'm not going to charge you for you just pay rent, right? So you're paying so you're using 100 hours of your laptop through the year. Okay, so let us better to so let's say so let's say this is your house, and this is your laptop. And so here if you had to use your laptop, first of all you have to purchase it, definitely. So this is a called a capital cost. Okay, so capital cost is a kind of a direct cost you're paying. So as I told you, you have to understand the terms of little bit of accounting over here. So the total cost of ownership is also a kind of a accounting term you can think of. So capital cost is how much? 50,000. You have to pay, definitely pay 50,000. And let's say in 1 year, how many hours of laptop did you use? Every day you're using, let's say 2 hours of laptop. That means 700, and whatever 700 hours you think, 720, 30 hours you think about, you know. So this many hours you used. So and then the second year you're using again 730 hours. So now if you have to what is the cost of um, so the so I don't want to talk. So there is some other, I was talking about some other thinking of talking about some other cost, but I will not talk. Oh, so capital cost is 70,000, and 1 year you are you are using for three how much, 730 hours. Then you are paying a electricity bill for this, right? So for 730 hours of computer that you're using, you may be probably be paying for 200 units of electricity, for example, and 200 units will probably be charged, let's say you're paying around 1000 or 2000 rupees. Then because you're putting using a AC, this your AC you're using in the full year 200 units, then again you are spending another AC, definitely the units are more, so you're probably using 800 units over here, and these charges will become 8000 in a year. And so you maybe you're paying the rent for the place that you are, this is the office, and you're paying rent, so rent may be there or not be there. Maybe you have every year some maintenance engineer is coming and repairing your computer or something, or upgrading something, you're paying another 1000 to 2000 over here. So let's say 2000 approximate cost is going over here for the softwares and maintenance and everything. So the cost of so this is a cost of ownership, you can say, on premises. And the when you want to use a machine inside the cloud, you have to see, compare the same cost of ownership for the same facilities inside the cloud. So when we talk about so here what you are going to pay for laptop will be going to be replaced with EC2, or some either you're using desktop service, something like such as workspaces. So workspace is I think it's called workspace, but it is like you having a desktop version of your machine on this. So whenever you can, it is on your browser, you can actually link to your desktop through these workspaces. And so your capital cost is nothing, right? Zero. You're not paying anything upfront over here. For 1 year you're paying for 730 hours. So 730 hours maybe something like 730 um into 360 seconds, right, per second. If it is a per second billing, then definitely, if you're going with Linux machine, then you're paying per second. If you're going with Windows, I think it is a little more, uh, but definitely this many seconds you're paying for. And so this can be probably paying for 20 uh, how many, this is like a lot of seconds, but so just think this cost, this is like 700 into 3000 is how much? 700, or 700 into 4000 we'll say. So 700 means 2 zeros, and 3000 means 3 zeros, and it is like 28,000 seconds. So so you may be paying 0.01 or maybe 0.001 per second, right? So divide by uh, um, so you have to minus 3 zeros, so this is like so let's make it 0.2, right? So this is 28 into 2 is 56, and remove 3 zeros, so this turns out to be less, so I think that it may be 0.2 then. So I hope you understood the cost difference. So here on one hand, for the cloud you're paying 70,000, then 8,000 becomes 78, then plus 280 plus 2,000, 82,000. So here the cost of ownership is how much? 82,000. And what is the same cost in the cloud? 56,000. But the only difference is usually when you want to shift to a cloud, you have already bought a laptop, so that you cannot avoid. So, but at some, so initially you cannot count 70,000 because you already bought the laptop now. Now, if you're moving to the cloud, you cannot compare. That is not a fair comparison. A fair comparison would be on the day one when you start there, you didn't have a laptop, then that would have been the difference. So, calculating sometimes cost of ownership can be tricky over here. So the thing is, this 56,000 will be charged in the first year, and in the beginning the cost of the cloud will look bigger than on premises. Only when you are using the cloud over a period of time, right, for many years, like say you're using, because when you're moving to the cloud, definitely you're looking at a long term strategy, like forever and ever, or something like at least 25 to 50 years timeline, right, of your company, wherever, as long as, so at least let's say 10 years, so 10-year timeline, any companies will be involved. So anytime you're doing the costing, you have to not only look for 1 year costing, but you have to look at a 10-year costing or a 3-year costing, and based on that costing, you have to see what is the cost of ownership, and whether whether there will be a benefit to move to a cloud, because cloud will also come with other facilities, right? It will come with a lot of hard benefits. Definitely is like the cost of the machine will be less, but there will be a lot of soft benefits also, right? Like soft benefits can be the time to launch machine is faster, and there is no least downtime, right? Over here it is always available, and you have the best of machines, all these things are indirectly, you are getting the best of engineers, you are having the best company supporting your services, and you are having the latest technologies, this thing keeps going on and on, so the soft benefits results in productivity of the company, right? So here you maybe you are thinking you're using only 730 hours of this, but you are also spending 100 hours to talk to coordinate, because coordinate because your machine is down, maybe, something, right? 100 to 200 has gone over the years, and this 100 hours, because you spend in resolving your issues with the machine, these are called unproductive hours. So in these unproductive hours, can you use your laptop? So no, the answer is no. So you lost your 100 hours, so that is also translating to a cost, right? The moment you're not productive, you cannot study, or you cannot run your business. So those kind of unproductivity is not found mostly in cloud. The cloud the availability is usually a lot of nines. So this is like, you can say this is a 5 nines availability. Means I will be available 99.99999% available. And how does cloud monitor this? We had already spoken about this service called service health dashboard, right? That is a service used to monitor the entire cloud, whether I'm available or not in all the regions. So so the cost of ownership of moving to the cloud initially, if you're just using it for 1 month, then definitely it may not make sense. But over the period of time, definitely this cost becomes huge for the company. So when we say total cost of ownership, we are talking about the cost of ownership on the cloud compared to the cost of ownership on the premises. So this cost of ownership, when it has to be decided, it has to be decided before we start using cloud. So remember this, okay? Once you start using cloud, once you made the decision based on this data, if you have made a decision to move to the cloud, then then you have to look for your savings, right? Did you save every year? Then total cost of ownership will not matter. Then what will matter is your return of investment. So remember this term, okay? This is all little bit of accounting terms. Because ultimately at the end of the day somebody has to pay for all the services, either the company or you or something, right? So you have to understand whenever you are using cloud, is there a return of investment, savings every year? So total cost of ownership may be very high in the beginning, and ROI, so TCO is you know, initially high, and but an ROI is definitely return is low, no, least it is. Oh yeah, but over the years, this will be inversely proportional, right? TCO will become low and ROI will definitely become high. So it is like you're investing in mutual fund, right? Initially the cost may look high, but over the years the return of investment will be higher over the period of many years. So I hope you understand that. So there may be some questions on TCO, okay? So here that is what they are giving example of on-premises versus cloud. Here you're using people, you have to pay for the people, you have to pay your bills, you have to have your contracts, you know, with your machine contract, you know, I mean with the engineers. Then you're actually paying for the laptop, which is equipment. And here on the cloud, no upfront expense. You're improving your time to market and agility, self-service architecture, scale up and down. All the advantages come in the cloud. So why somebody has to go to cloud? So you can tell that the total cost of ownership over the period of years is becomes less and return of investment becomes high. That's why we need to move to the cloud. And then definitely you can speak about benefits, right? So when you're talking about cost, you have to look into the you need to look into different costs, right? So these are the different costs where, because you're paying for everything, server cost, storage cost, network cost, IT labor cost inside your company. So in that also you're paying for the space that you're storing. You know, you have to store it somewhere, right? Your AC or your machine. You're paying for the space. You're paying for the electricity. You're paying for the AC. Everything is connected over here. You're paying for the softwares, right? For the operating system, for whatever softwares you're buying, or well, let's say if you're a security company, then you're paying for the firewalls, softwares, you know, licenses, your antiviruses, etc. And you're actually paying for the hardware also, for all the SAN technology, your LANs, your network cables, your racks, everything as a payment. And there's an administration cost like labor, right? Ultimately people are the who are going to run this entire hardware and AC and everything. So there is a server administration cost, which is called, it comes under IT labor cost. So labor means people. So here they have having three columns. On the left hand side is all the you know, things that you are going to that you're paying for. On the second column you have all the cost for on premises, and the third column the cost of AWS. And this cost is calculated for how much time? For a year. So minimum 1 year period you have to calculate what is the total cost. So it says your 3 year total savings could be $159 913. So over a period of 3 years, the savings will be more. But so remember, if you're using cloud only for less time, the cost will be maybe more, and it may not make sense to move to the cloud in that case. Just for the temporary being, let's say, you know, unless you don't have the facilities and you want to move to the cloud, then it's okay. But if you have the facility and if you just need for 1 hour, then you know, then it won't make sense, right? But let's say if you but usually companies would never take a chance. They will always want, even if you have your own systems, they will always want to have one backup inside the cloud system. So they'll replicate the entire on premises on the cloud, And in case something happens on the on premises as a part of their DR solution, which is a disaster recovery, some disaster happens on premises, they will move to the cloud. So they can have this kind of strategy also. So there is something known as a pricing calculator. So where you can add all the cost over here, so and calculate it. So if you look at, I think it is aws.com/calculator or something, I think. So you can create an estimate over here. What is the total cost? So you are not charged for this. Remember, you're just estimating. So initially, if you do not know how much you're going to charge, so but you know that you're going to use EC2, for example. So you can say I'm going to use EC2, and you then try to see how much that EC2 will be charged. Okay, it's a little slow. Okay, then you'll say I want a Mumbai office, to Mumbai region cost, and then you choose a region over here. So here you say, for example, you choose Asia Pacific Mumbai. So you're changing the region, means you're changing the building where your machines are going to run. So here we'll go with a quick estimate, and it says, are you going to have your Linux operating system? I say yes, I'm going to have a Linux operating EC2. And how many CPUs I'm going to use? I'll say I'm going to use 2 CPUs, and memory I'm going to use 8 GB. So if I want more, I can add more. Okay, add requirement will add more. And what type of machine? T4.large it says. Um, so which means if I'm going for 2 CPUs and 8 GB memory, then the minimum machine that I have to go for is T4G.large machine. That is the type of machine you have to go for. And how many machines I want? I want, let's say, 2 machines. And how much time it will run? So I'll say in a month it will run only for 15 days, means 50% of the time only it will run. And do I want to go for reserved or on demand? So on demand, as I told you, is pay as you go, means per second per hour. But let's say I'm going for standard, or for whole 1 year I want to pay standard reserved instances. I'm paying for the entire 1 year first only. So that I'll pay for 1 year, and I'll not pay. I'll pay all the money upfront only, right in the beginning. So I'll get more discounts. And how much storage I will use? So I will say I'm using 50 GB. So and I'll say add to my estimate over here. So right now it is saying the monthly cost will be $11. So if you multiply by approximately 70, you will get approximate money in rupees. So this is like 700 rupees per month, and for the entire year this will be like 30,000 per year, and I will add it to my estimate. Now I can add another service. So this total cost of ownership of EC2 is $600 inside the cloud. If I want another service, so something, let's say I'm using Lambda functions. So I configure now Lambda. So include free tier, I'll say no, don't include free tier, because I may be operating outside the free tier, no. So let's say I'm calling a Lambda function every day for 20 times, at least let's say 100 times in a day, and for 365 days in a year. So how many requests is going? 365 into 100, right? 360, this many requests is going. So for every request you're getting charged. And how many seconds it will run one program? So I'll say this one program is running for milliseconds. No? So milliseconds, I'll say it is 300, 500 milliseconds. An amount of memory that I'm going to use, I'm saying I'm going to use 100 MB of memory. Amount of allocated can be less than point. Okay, so so this is like 100 and uh, okay, so more than 125 MB, so minimum 126 MB I have to say, so 126 will work. So 126 doesn't work. Okay, 130 works. So 130 MB of memory I'm going to use, and enter the concurrency configured for this function. Concurrency means at the same time two people are calling the same lambda function, then that is what it's referring to, but we will not go into this concurrency. And lambda at the edge means this just like CloudFront is there's some CloudFront is a agent running or standing in the front. Lambda at edge is also running the function on the edge, which is like your CloudFront. So CloudFront uses edge locations ultimately, and lambda is using edge location. So whatever runs on your edge, which is nearest to your location, is called edge. So that locations are called edge locations, and that kind of techniques are called edge computing. Okay, so remember this term. So it is saying, are you going to run the lambda on the edge? So let's say I have a lambda function running in US, but using lambda edge would mean that lambda function is a duplicate copy is made and stored in Mumbai region somewhere, and whenever I'm calling a lambda function locally, that edge lambda function is getting called for me, and that so that will be much faster, right, compared to going all the way to US. So I will say I'm not using lambda edge, and then I will say add estimate. So how much charges I'm paying? $0.05. I'll say add to the estimate. So for the entire year, for for 100 requests every day, every the entire year, I'm being charged only that much. So that is my total cost, and I can export this estimate. So so in your company, if the company says how much will it cost to move to the cloud, you can prepare such an estimate and say, see, this is the cost of, so let me open the file. Column with. So here you can give company this report, okay? You can print it in the PDF format and say this is upfront cost, this is a monthly cost. So at least from the cost of ownership of cloud is concerned, you are given. Then company what it has to do, you need to go to your company and say, okay, what is the cost of the laptop? So you have to look out for the department which has been involved with accounting department for sure, right? They have been the people who have been paying, so they can give you a similar kind of report, and you can then come up with a joint report, which compares both the rates and sees whether there is a saving or not, and come up with a plan how you want to move, in what, how many steps you want to move. Maybe you don't want to move entirely, you just want to move part by part, and you will come up with your own strategy depending on the risk of moving to the cloud. Okay, so whenever you're moving to the cloud also, you have to make sure the business is continuously running. Okay, so you cannot move everything in one go, so you have to move in layers. So the most least less riskier application, or less or applications that do not impact your financials, or which are less critical, those are the first ones to move to cloud. And later you can in the end, the most critical piece can move depending on whether you really want to move everything or not. So it is quite possible that you may have a strategy that only 50% of your applications are actually moved to the cloud, because you felt those are the only applications which is worthy of moving to the cloud, and rest 50% you want to run it within the premises. So those kind of decisions can be taken depending on the kind of organization that it is, or the kind of domains that they're working in. So that was about pricing calculator. So when pricing calculator is used, pricing calculator is again used in when you are uh, before you move to the cloud. Okay. And I already spoke to you about hard benefits and soft benefits, right? So hard benefits is something directly you're paying for the compute, storage, networking, security, but indirectly you are, because these things are now working fine, you can focus on doing productive work, right? You don't have to worry about machines are running or not, whether license is there or not, whether people are there to ensure whether the service is running or not. You can focus more on your real work, right? Like your business work, banking work, or maybe if you're a developer, you can focus more on writing innovative programs, coming up with a new program for new features. You're not solving bugs over here anymore. You're solving more of your new features, and which can lead to more better business execution. Your business operations will improve, your business profits will improve. So there is a lot of soft benefits also that comes because you move to the cloud. So I've already spoke about return of investment, and there is a case study that they have done over here, so you can go through it. So this AWS organization, so this is the next topic over here. So there are going to be around 2-3 questions. I've seen a lot of questions around, at least 2 or 3 questions I'm seeing out of the 75 questions. I think 2 or 3 questions are on AWS organization. So AWS organization is basically a service where you have an organization, let's say of 100 employees, and you want to give everybody has to be given access. So you can use this AWS organization where you can add all the users to this service, and because they are your employees, the employees won't be charged. All that billing will be charged to the person who created this organization. So let's say I am State Bank of India. So I will create an organization called State Bank of India. Then I will create a groups within that. I will say there is a Mumbai branch, and Mumbai branch I will create 100 accounts, and those 100 accounts I will give it to 100 employees. So I will at this level, so I'm creating an organization chart kind of a hierarchy over here, and everyone will use the AWS service through this facility, but they won't be charged. When who will be charged? The final bill will go to SBI. Facing network issue. I just wanted to show you a little bit on how it looks like. Okay, so let me try to explain. Maybe you can look at this some other time. But what it basically means is, first of all, you need to have a root user account, right? I hope you all understand the difference between root user account. So root user account will go ahead and will create an organization over here. It may basically just give some name to it. Okay, so it can be something such as State Bank of India. So in this organization, then you can create groups, or the exact term is what will I can see it inside once it comes up. Um, Let me stop this. Anyway, can I get a the network is slow. Okay, so in these groups, maybe one group, level one group, I will say it is Mumbai branch, and let's say it is Delhi branch over here. And inside this Mumbai branch also, I can create more subgroups. So you can create as many subgroups as you want, a group within a group within a group, right? So in Mumbai branch, I can have Borivali branch. I can have so let's say whatever Kalyan branch, Murbad branch. I can have as many branches, and each branch, each group. So let's say I have this group over here, and even I can break this up if I want. So there is so let's say there is a Borivali West branch, and there is a Borivali East branch, and then I will send invitations by email. Let's say. So I have uh, you know say let's say John or Jacob, and so Jacob at gmail.com. So John at gmail.com. I will send. So these are my employees messages. So employees with the address will be sbi.com and sbi.com. Okay. So here, so let's say we have Nikita, right? Nikita at sbi.com, Priscilla at sbi.com, right? And you can keep doing this, right? Depending on uh, depending on how your organization is. So I will send emails to this and say, see, I have created, so you will get an email, each one of you will get an email, say, you join this organization AWS and start using AWS services for services. So because you may be a key developer or maybe a key person that has to be provided access. And each person will say, yeah, okay, will join your organization. And so Nikita, so let's say I am creating this organization, my billing will tell me each how this organization has used, what all services they have used, and what are the types of charges, compute charges, storage charges, data transfer charges. Everything will be built on the top. So final bill I may be paying over here. Let's say I'm paying around let's say 20,000 per month or something for all the bills for the entire organization. So this way, tomorrow if I feel I need to control the access or remove the access, I can still control it from the higher level. State Bank of India at the higher level can control all these accounts and what all services they use and where all what all permissions are given, or and when the employees leave, definitely they will be not be allowed to use this organization. So yeah, it says, right, it defines and manage organization, secure and manage your organization, but I wanted a document to see user guide. I don't know why this is taking time. So when I say groups, it is called OU, okay, organizational units. That is what organization units is to group the accounts together, and there is only one root in the organization, which is the root user. So you can create OU, and it's not necessary you have to do it through the management console. You can also use CLI and SDK to create these organizations. So programmatically you can do all this. So programmatically I can read an Excel file and create an organization, right? And you can delete a unit also. So it's pretty straightforward AWS organization. So the word that this common billing is called consolidated billing. Okay, so that is the key word you need to remember. Consolidation means bringing together. Okay, that is what it means, bringing together. So that is bringing together, or you can say it is a sum of everything. You know, it is a summary of everything, something like that. So this word consolidated billing is definitely going to be used in your question. So remember what consolidated billing means. Organization, the main advantage is consolidated billing. So in consolidated billing, if you're paying, definitely you are looking at a very big volume, right? So what is the biggest advantage? You will get volume discounts, because if more the number of people are using, the more the volume is, and entire volume has been billed to one account, and so that account will definitely get a volume discount. So there is one biggest advantage of AWS organization is the savings over here. And and then you can have a plan where how you want to optimize the use of machines uh, on the cloud. Maybe one machine is shared with multiple people and everything, so that way you can go for a reserved instance if possible. Reserved instance may be used, containers may be used, whatever, and it may be shared with multiple users. But the main thing is there is a lot of savings. It is a consolidated billing. There's a lot of savings in this kind of service, and it is mainly for organizations to manage AWS cloud in a more proper manner. Okay, so this is the icon which they are representing in your design diagram. If you have to draw, you have to use these icons, AWS icons. So there is a root over here, and there is an organization unit over here, and under the organization, every organization unit has some account over here, and you can have one organization unit under another organization unit, and you can have policies on this, right? Your policy is nothing but permissions. So this permission you will be telling whether they can use S3, whether they can use EC2, or whatever. So you can define this policy inside your IAM also. So it is a group based account management, it is policy based account management. So the entire organization can be controlled as to what services they use using the policy. It is at the group level, one policy is applied to everyone. So maybe there is a IT department for which you want to give access for listing the bucket, reading the bucket, uploading the file, and maybe on the left hand side there is just a business department for which you just want to give access to a website, a Beanstalk website, or a link to the website over here. Maybe a CloudFront link which displays all the reports and everything. So in your entire organization you can control based on these policies. And consolidated billing is definitely one of the advantages, right, over here. And so policy based account management, group based account management, consolidated billing, and this fourth one is application programming interface that automate account management. So from your CLI and SDK you can automate this entire process, right? You can have your own website through which you are going to call AWS and control the entire organization. So you can have controls, I can have IAM policies, right? That's what I mentioned about. Service control policies enable you to allow or deny access to AWS service for individuals or group accounts in an organization unit. So, we'll look at that later. The difference between different types of policies. So name of the organization or name of any unit should not be more than 250 characters. That is what they're saying. The number of AWS accounts, the invitation is sent to the accounts against this limit. Number of roots, so root user is only one always, right? Number of organization unit, maximum you can have 1000. Number of policies you can have maximum 1000. Maximum size of the policy document is 5120 bytes. So in this basically this is like a JSON file. Okay, so one file cannot be more than 5 kilobytes. Then maximum nesting of OU, maximum 5 levels of nesting, one OU under another OU, maximum 5 levels you can have. Invitations that can be sent per day is 20. So you have to automate this process. If you have a lot of employees, then you make sure you have a program which runs and send 20 new employees every day, and slowly you get everyone inside the organization. Okay. So this is section 4, and I think we can halt. This is taking a little longer time, but I hope I taught you something new, because those are the kind of questions you'll have.